Hi everybody, welcome back to This Week in Magic Online Finance. I'm your host Chaz Andres, and as always, we're going to get started with the news. And of course, this week, the big story is Pro Tour Ixalan. That top 8 is finishing up as I'm recording this, and, well, it looks good compared to how I thought it would on day one. When I looked at that first metagame, I admit I was a little bit disheartened. If you combine the number of Temur energy decks with the number of 4-color energy decks, which is essentially Temur energy with the black splash, you ended up with more than 40% of that day one metagame. That is not very diverse. But here's the good news. It was actually a really awesome weekend of Magic. The games that were actually played were very compelling, and it never felt like the same deck was showing up on stream over and over and over again. And the top 8 actually bears this out. There were energy decks. There was 4-color energy, there was Temur energy, there was Sultai energy, which is actually a fairly different deck, but there were also a bunch of other decks. Ramunap Red was there, God Pharaoh's Gift, a new Jeskai version of Approach was there, and Mardu Vehicles. That's a fairly diverse metagame, especially for a standard format that appears to be dominated by just a couple of very insular strategies. Now, usually there's a lot of price movement around a Pro Tour because it happens about 2 weeks after a set is released, and it's our first chance to see those cards in action. That wasn't the case this time around. Ixalan has been on shelves for a little bit over a month, and the metagame was fairly well defined going into this event. There just weren't all that many surprises. But the fact that the metagame is healthy and interesting is news in and of itself, and there were some cards worth keeping an eye on. Let's take a look at those right now. Now, the first of those cards is Vraska Relic Seeker, which also gained the most ground of any card in Standard this week. It jumped about 7 tickets from 15 up to about 22, and this is mostly due to its performance at the Pro Tour. It's become a staple in 4-color energy as well as Sultai energy, appearing in those black versions of the energy decks alongside the Scarab God. Now, because Ixalan is a fairly low power set, not a lot of cards from Ixalan actually made an appearance at Pro Tour Ixalan, Vraska may end up being worth more than it would otherwise. All of that value from a set has to go somewhere, and if a mythic rare, if a planeswalker is making a decent splash on the standard battlefield, that's where that value is going to end up. So even though if it were in Kaladesh, it may only be a 15 to 20 ticket card, in Ixalan, at least short term, it may end up closer to that 25 to 30 ticket range. Now, the other standard card I want to spend some time on this week is Angel of Invention. Now, Angel of Invention also gained about 7 tickets this week. It jumped from 7 up to about 14, but I think it might end up going higher. Not only did God Pharaoh's Gift make the top 8 as a fairly budget standard deck, but Mono White Vampires looked awesome at the Pro Tour. It didn't make the top 8, but it seems fairly well positioned against both Ramunap Red and Temur Energy, which are the format's 2 most important decks. Regardless, I expect a lot of articles to be written about both Mono White Vampires and God Pharaoh's Gift over the next couple of days, and that alone could drive Angel of Invention up toward the 20 ticket mark. Let's move on to Modern, where Cavern of Souls is the card that gained the most ground this week. It jumped 6 tickets from 30 up to about 36, and this is mostly due to the fact that that big old crazy humans deck from Star City Games Cincinnati a few weeks ago continues to do well in Modern leagues on Magic Online. Cavern of Souls is also really good in Elves, in Eldrazi Tron, and in janky tribal decks all over the place. This price chart is actually still pointing up, so I wouldn't be surprised if Cavern of Souls ends up breaking the 40 ticket mark later this week. Now, before we move on to our losers, I did want to mention the fact that Liliana of the Veil has gained about 2 tickets this week. And I mention this only because I spent the past couple of weeks hammering home the idea that Liliana of the Veil had bottomed out and would start to climb in price again. And I do think that that has finally started to happen. I don't expect it to be an easy, quick thing, a big spike that we'll see on our charts over the next couple of weeks, but I do think that a slow, steady gain throughout the winter is possible. If you still want these cards, this is your chance to buy in. Moving on to our biggest loser, where in Standard, it was Carnage Tyrant. Carnage Tyrant dropped 3.5 tickets from 1250 down to about 9, and that's not surprising. Dinosaurs were a no-show at the Pro Tour, and Carnage Tyrant had actually been seeing some sideboard play, maybe a main deck one of in some of the energy builds. that appears to be past us. It's not a part of the current metagame at all. I do still think that dinosaurs are going to be hot again once Rivals of Ixalan spoiler season begins, and Carnage Tyrant in particular will probably gain some hype from that new cycle of cards. However, for now, the price continues to tumble, and I think it'll drop significantly between now and when it's time to buy back in again. The biggest loser this week in Modern is Tarmogoyf. The mighty old Lurgoyf has fallen yet another 3 tickets from 24 down to 21. And I don't see a price floor for this card. It used to be that Tarmogoyf couldn't ever fall past a certain mark no matter what, but at this point, 12, maybe 15 tickets could even go lower if it's reprinted in yet another master set. So at what point does it make sense to buy back in? Remember, Bloodbraid Elf is a card that we're all expecting to be unbanned at some point in Modern, and when that happens, people are going to want to buy back into Modern Jund. And what's Modern Jund without a couple of Goyfs lying around? So let's check back in December, maybe early January, and see if there's some money to be made here. Now the sneak of the week this week is Liliana. Not Liliana of the Veil, but Liliana the Last Hope, which was 18 tickets back in early September. It's up to 28 tickets now. And I really like this card because it's not going to be reprinted again anytime soon. It also sees a ton of play in both Modern and Legacy. So that price chart continues to tick up, and this may be your last chance to buy in under the 30 ticket mark. I could see this thing being 40 or 50 tickets by this time next year. Now I finish off each week by taking a look at the MTGO Traders hot list. These are the cards that are extra hot in the Magic Online metagame right now, so MTGO Traders is paying a little bit extra for them. And you can find the list yourself at mtgotraders.com/hotlist or on Magic Online at hotlistbot and hotlistbot2. Alright, so this week let's take a look at some of the cards from the Pro Tour top 8. Now, MTGO Traders is paying 14 tickets for Angel of Invention, about 11.5 on Walking Ballista, and 10 apiece on the 2 most crucial lands in Standard, Botanical Sanctum and Spirebluff Canal. Aethersphere Harvester is on the list at just over 5 tickets, and Disallow at just over 4. These are all very good cards. They're likely to continue being good for at least the foreseeable future, but remember that this is going to be Standard's high watermark for at least a little while. The week after the Pro Tour always is. So if you like to sell into seasonal trends, this might be your best shot for at least a couple of weeks. That's all I got for you this week. Don't forget to like the video, please subscribe to the channel. There's a ton of high quality Magic content on here, and I will see you all next Monday for the next episode of This Week in Magic Online Finance.